Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Poetry Thursday, where I read you a poem and opinionize about it. We are reading our way through this 20th century American poetry. Should ordinarily be that title would ordinarily be a description of the kind of poetry that I would avoid for something like Poetry Thursday, but I've decided to read this thing from front to back with you, so that we can watch how poetry changed in the 20th century. We can wait for the fateful year in which it died as a popular genre, and we're not there yet. Instead, today we are going to deal not with someone who's here for a representative poem, and that makes them odd, and not here as someone who's here who shouldn't be, because they're minor and their editors don't want to admit it, but rather a poet who is here despite the fact that this poet is much better known for writing something that isn't poetry. And the poet is Robert Penn Warren, whose 1940s novel, All the King's Men, is one of the great American novels. It's one of the great, certainly one of the great American political novels, but I would argue also in that legendary American fiction canon from 1945 to 2025, it would be one of the earliest contenders and one of the greatest. It's a fantastic novel. People don't, when they think of Robert Penn Warren now, people don't think of him as a poet, but he had an active career as a poet as well. And our editors include a few poems of his. Intriguingly, the first one they include is from the 1940s, and the other two are from decades later. I'm not going to read you the early one. I'm going to read you the two that are later, one from 1975 and one from 1981. So we're getting closer and closer to our present day, not only for the birth dates of the poets, but for the publication dates of what we're reading. So the first one is called Evening Hawk. From plane of light to plane, wings dipping through geometries and orchids that the sunset builds, out of the peak's black angularity of shadow, riding the last tumultuous avalanche of light above pines and the guttural gorge, the hawk comes. His wings scythe down another day. His motion is that of the honed steel edge. We hear the crashless fall of stalks of time. The head of each stalk is heavy with the gold of our error. Look, look, he is climbing the last light who knows neither time nor error, nor under whose wing, unforgiving, the world, unforgiven, swings into shadow. Long now, the last thrush is still, the last bat now cruises in his sharp hieroglyphics. His wisdom is ancient too, and immense. The star is ready, like Plato, over the mountains. Is there no wind we might, we think, hear the earth grind on its axis, or history drip in darkness like a leaking pipe in the cellar? And that is huge, grand, evocative language over a bad poem. That is a dumb, obvious poem. That a hawk is somehow a sigil of the dividing line between day and night, between past and present, between the known and the unknown. And why? Because a hawk, when he's flying, is flat. He's a flat line. He's a plane. He's from plane of light to plane. It's just a hawk in the air. It's okay. It'd be interesting in one way if it was what it signified to the narrator of the poem, but you don't believe it. This feels like poetry, in the worst possible way. It feels like poetry. That final stanza: if there were no wind, we might, we think, hear the earth grind on its axis, or history drip in the darkness like a leaking pipe in the cellar. No. If the sunset is quiet, we don't think that. It's the sunset could be saying and making any noise it wants. You could be playing John Philip Sousa. You still wouldn't think that. But that's from 1975, when our author was a little long in the tooth. Let's go all the way to 1981 for the second poem. What voice at Moth Hour? What voice at Moth Hour did I hear calling as I stood in the orchard, while the white petals of apple blossoms were falling, whiter than moth wing, in that twilight? What voice did I hear as I stood by the stream, bemused in the murmurous wisdom there uttered, while ripples at stone in their steely gleam caught last night before it was shuttered? What voice did I hear as I wandered alone in a premature night of cedar, beech, oak, each foot set soft with still as stone, standing to wait while the first owl spoke? The voice that I heard once at dewfall, I now can hear by a simple trick. If I close my eyes in that dusk, I again know the feel of damp grass between bare toes. Can see the last zigzag sky skittering high of a dull bull bat, even hear, far off from swamp cover, the willow-wisp, and as I once heard, hear the voice, "It's late, come home." So the poem starts out with the narrator wondering, what is that I'm hearing? What voice is that I'm hearing here at the end of the day, the moth hour? Nice little phrase. When the night is starting to rise up, the darkness is starting to die down. What is that voice that I hear? And it's only later in the poem, halfway through the poem, the action of that narrator changes. Suddenly it's not what voice do I hear, but the narrator is remembering something. It's not what voice did I hear, what voice is hearing at the liminal space between day and night like this, but what am I remembering? We get the voice that I heard once at dewfall. So we have shifted now into the past, and we realize that the narrator is thinking about a voice that he once heard. And it's a simple thing. It's not anything cosmic like the first poem. It's a simple thing. It's late, come home. What he heard with his, what was it again? The feel of damp grass between bare toes. A child. He's remembering that it was late at night, it was getting towards nightfall, and he heard a voice saying, "It's late, come home." His parents telling him that. At least that's my reading. Maybe your reading is different. It's even this, what voice at Moth Hour is still average. It's an average poem. It's easy. It and Evening Hawk are both very easy poems. And a lot of what Robert Penn Warren wrote in his poetry is very easy. It's meant to be poetry. It's meant to be poetic. It's meant to have arch, oh, isn't that insightful combinations of real-world things and metaphysical things. It's not entirely impressive. I have to say it's not entirely impressive. But it ends the next section of this book. And now we move on to what the editors of this anthology are calling mid-century poets. And you know what that means. That means trouble. So Robert Penn Warren we end with here. I cannot recommend Robert Penn Warren as a poet, but I strongly, strongly recommend All the King's Men. His book, his novel. He's actually really, all of his fiction is really good, but that is brilliant. One of the two great political novels in America. So I strongly recommend it to you. I'm not sure that I can be enthusiastic about the poetry, but maybe you like it better than I do. That's it for Poetry Thursday. Robert Penn Warren, a figure we associate with prose. But I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back next week when we embark on the mid-century poets. What could possibly go wrong? Thank you, BookTube.